Welcome back, everyone. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASI. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode number 28. In today's episode, we just got a couple of things to get into. I'm actually going to try to get this episode out a day earlier than usual for one specific reason. It's because of UFC Fight Night tomorrow night. That's right, Saturday. We got a nice UFC fight going on. So I'm going to give you a few picks from that so that I can get this out Saturday. And then, of course, we're going to finish the episode with my picks for NFL Sunday. I believe this is week number 15. So let's get into it. So to start, we're going to talk about UFC Fight Night, Buckley versus Covington. Okay, so now in this fight that happens tomorrow night, I'm going to give you 3 different picks for this event. I'm going to give you one pick for a favorite who's on the prelim card, that they're the favorite to win the fight, even though it's actually a small favorite, that I'm giving you my pick to win. I'm also going to do the same thing for my underdog pick that's on the prelims. So this is somebody who's not favored to win, but I think has a solid chance at winning the fight. And then, of course, I'm going to give you my pick and prediction for the main event. So let's dive right into it. Starting off with my favorite pick for UFC Fight Night, Covington versus Buckley. And I am going with Sean Woodson to beat Fernando Padilla. Now, both of these guys have really good length considering the weight class that they're in. The only difference is that Sean Woodson has abnormal length and height for his weight class. Most people with his height and length fight in 2 weight classes above the weight class he fights in. Now, because of this, he tends to be susceptible to being taken down, or if he's fighting somebody who has like a heavy grappling attack, that could be a disadvantage. But in this case, Padilla, that is not Padilla's strength. Padilla is also a lengthy stand-up fighter. And if you watch some of his previous fights, you'll notice he likes to pressure fighters with his length. He likes to throw good jabs down the middle and some clean hooks. And I think this is just a stylistic matchup that will favor Woodson, because I think Padilla is going to try to pressure him. And in pressuring him, I think Woodson will be able to maintain distance and kind of pick him apart with long kicks to the calf, long straight jabs to the face. Because that's the one thing about Padilla moving forward. He does have a tendency to get hit with jabs pretty cleanly. And I don't believe he's fought anybody with this type of height and length like he's going to be doing against Woodson. Woodson right now, when I last checked the odds, was minus 155 to win. So it's not a huge, drastic favorite for Woodson, which means that, odds makers think that the fight could essentially go either way. And I agree. I wouldn't be utterly shocked if Padilla won. But I do think that Sean Woodson is going to get the win, mainly, like I said, because of a stylistic disadvantage for Padilla. And I do think it'll probably go to distance, but I do think Woodson is going to win a unanimous decision. Now for my underdog pick on this UFC Fight Night, I'm going with Miles Johns to beat Felipe Lima. Now, Miles Johns is, right now, his odds are plus 200 to win. So that means if you were to bet $100 on him to win, you would win $200. He's not the favorite against Lima, and it makes sense. Lima has a more well-rounded game. I would say he's more precise with his striking, and like I said, I understand why Lima's the favorite. The reason why I'm giving Johns a solid shot at pulling off the upset is because Johns is very aggressive. He is kind of like a Tasmanian devil, but not in a sense of being wild, but just in a sense of being persistent. Like, Johns does a great job of closing distance. Obviously, he's very short, so he kind of has to close distance. And I think in this fight, he's going to be able to do that effectively and be able to pull off the win. So even though he is plus 200 right now, I am taking Miles Johns in the upset. Now that leads to the main event of the evening. That's right, the whole UFC fight card is built off the main event. That is Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. Now this is going to be a very exciting fight. Colby Covington has been scratching and clawing to try to get back into relevance. You know, he had his big showing when he was the number one contender for the longest time when Kamaru Usman was the champion. He lost to him twice. And essentially, since that time period, he's kind of just dwindled away. And Colby Covington's big, I could say, marketing scheme is based around him being controversial, him trying to push people's buttons, him being, aligning himself with controversial figures. So I think all of that is starting to wear off. I think people are starting to see, where his fighting skill actually falls into place with some of the other top fighters. Now, I do think that Covington has a solid chance at winning this fight because he's a really strong wrestler. And Joaquin Buckley hasn't really been tested to that degree of having to fight somebody with such a strong wrestling background. I think Covington's entire game plan is going to be to shoot for takedowns and just basically keep the fight close proximity, not letting Joaquin Buckley get off explosive shots. And I think probably, I would say at least the first round, I think Covington is going to have great success doing that. Now, as far as my prediction itself, I'm actually picking Joaquin Buckley to get the win, and I'm picking Joaquin Buckley to get the win by knockout. That's right. I think that Joaquin Buckley is just far too explosive for Covington. I do think Covington's wrestling game will match up well against Buckley, but I just don't think in a 5-round fight he's going to be able to hold him off long enough to not get hit with any of his explosive attacks, and I just don't see him being able to take it. I've seen Covington be dropped before by Usman. I've seen him being dropped actually on a couple of occasions, and Joaquin Buckley is much more powerful than anybody that Covington has fought before, so I could definitely see Buckley landing a knee when Covington's trying to shoot. I could see Buckley landing a clean hook off of a jab. Tons of different options. I think Buckley really impressed me with his last fight. I thought that was his biggest test to date, and he showed that he was able to not just gas himself out with his explosiveness. He was able to be measured and use his explosiveness in specific points and handle much tougher competition. So I think that experience that he got from his last fight is going to carry over to this one. And like I said, I do predict that Buckley will win by knockout. All right, so lastly, we got to get into my picks for NFL Sunday. This is week 15. For anyone new to the channel, for all of my Sunday NFL picks, I give you 5 different game picks, my pick 3, my lock of the week, and then my underdog pick of the week. We're going to get started with that pick 3. Now, the first game in my pick 3 this week, I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals to beat the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals are favored to win by 5.5 points right now. They're going on the road to Tennessee. Cincinnati is currently hanging on to playoff chances like for dear life. They're on their last thread, essentially. They have to win out to have any shot at making the playoffs. And I think, coming off of getting a win last week, having lost so many beforehand, they did it on prime time on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys. Now they're going into a game against Tennessee, who just came off a terrible loss in division against a bottom-tier team. So even though Cincinnati's record isn't much better than Tennessee's, I just feel like the trajectory of each team is going in different directions. I'm pretty much back to what I've been saying all season, that there's no hope for Tennessee as long as Will Levis is the quarterback. And last time I checked, he's still the quarterback. And the way that Cincinnati has been scoring, they've struggled all year because their defense hasn't been able to stop anybody. But I don't think that Levis can lead this offense to the point where they can score 35 points. They did score over 30 one game against the Texans. I said it then, I'll say it again. I think that was just, like they say, a broke clock is right twice a day. It's that kind of thing. So I don't expect that to happen again, which means they're not going to be able to score enough to keep up with Cincinnati. I have also been saying, though, that Tennessee's defense is actually very underrated. They're a lot better than people realize because the team overall sucks. But I think that Cincinnati's offense is just overall too explosive to where Tennessee's not going to be able to hold them back, and Cincinnati will get the win. Now, the next game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the Cleveland Browns on the road. Now, this game, the Chiefs are favored to win by 4.5 points. Now, most people looking at the spread, they'd be like, why is the spread so small? Surprisingly to a lot of people, the spread originally was 6.5. It immediately got bet down to 4.5. And even though it's surprising to others, it's not surprising to me. If anybody's new to the channel, yes, I am a Chiefs fan. So some might say I'm overly critical. Some might say I'm not critical enough. But I'm a realist about my team. And I understand why this line is so tight. And it's one reason and one reason only. It's because Myles Garrett is likely going to destroy our offensive tackles. Now, I'm hoping that he spends most of the time on our right tackle, what hasn't been fantastic, but it's a lot better than what we've had going on at left tackle. If they move Myles Garrett to left tackle, we're probably going to have to plan, the Chiefs are probably going to have to plan to roll out to the right every single time. This is a type of game where Myles Garrett could end up with 3 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, or a tipped pass because, we were supposed to cut him and then they miss and then he tips the ball in the air, catches it, and runs it back. This is definitely a game that Myles Garrett could wreck and take over himself. And considering that it's on the road in Cleveland, so the weather's going to be bad, which plays to the advantage of Cleveland in the sense that it takes away from Kansas City's speed on offense. So with Worthy running down the field, he can't run as fast in those conditions. So definitely one of those games that I think is going to be a lot closer than people expect. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Cleveland covers the spread. I wouldn't be surprised if Cleveland gets the win. But I am taking Kansas City to get the win, mainly just because I believe that Mahomes will find a way to get it done no matter what. Essentially, that's been the calling card all season, by any means necessary. I think this will be more the same. I think the defense will also get kind of a boost this week, even though they've struggled more than they had earlier in the season the last 3 weeks. So I think they'll be able to pull off the win. Now, the last game in my pick 3 is kind of a surprise, only because the team that I'm picking to win doesn't have a good record. Out of the teams, these 3 teams that I picked, they actually have the worst record of the 3. And that is the Carolina Panthers. That's right. For the first time in my pick 3 all season, I am picking the Carolina Panthers to win. They are actually at home against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, it sounds crazy because Carolina is actually favored to win this game by 3 points. Now, if before the season I told you that at the end of the season the Carolina Panthers would be favored to beat the Dallas Cowboys at home, you would think that I must have read the line wrong. And I totally get it. But the Cowboys are not what we expected them to be, and Carolina is actually a lot better than most people think they are. In this game, surprisingly, even though the line is only 3 points, I actually expect Carolina to beat Dallas by more than 3 points. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a double-digit win. I just feel like Carolina has been playing a lot better since Bryce Young has gotten back in the starting position. They've had losses, but they've been losses to really good teams. Actually, 2 out of their last 3 losses are to teams that are in the top 5. Matter of fact, in my last rating, it was a team who was 2nd and 3rd. So I think Carolina's kind of getting slept on, which makes sense. But I think in this matchup, the way Dallas has kind of been falling apart, I just feel like Carolina's going to really see all of that elevated play that they've been putting in the last few weeks really start to show itself against a lesser opponent. And I think Carolina pulls off the win easily. Now the next pick in my picks for Sunday, I'm going with my lock of the week. Now this week's lock of the week also happens to be the largest spread of the week. It is the 2nd largest of the season. Yes, I think it is. No, actually, this actually might be the largest of the season, because the other game that I also ended up picking as my lock of the week earlier in the season was the Detroit game. I think they were only favored to win by 14, and they ended up winning by, I think, 40 or something like that. Well, in this game, the spread is 16 points. This game is the Baltimore Ravens on the road against the New York Giants. And the Ravens, when I last checked, were favored to win by 16 points. So it's a huge spread. You rarely see this kind of spread in an NFL game. And the Ravens have had trouble closing out games throughout the season. They have also had trouble playing down to their competition. We've seen that on multiple occasions. People forget that the Ravens actually lost to the Raiders earlier in the season because they couldn't close games. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in this case. Could the Giants cover the 16 points? Yeah, they could. But I think also with this being off of the Ravens bye week, I just think it's bad timing. I'm actually predicting the Ravens not only win this game as a part of my lock of the week, but I think they win by more than 20 and cover the spread also. I just feel like it's a bad matchup. The Giants' offense hasn't really been productive, and the Ravens coming off of a bye are going to be looking to really just run the ball down their throats and have explosive deep passes. I don't really think they're going to be able to contain Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry, so I expect Baltimore to win by more than 20 points. Now, the last game of my picks is my underdog pick of the week. For those that are new, underdog pick of the week means a team has to be favored to lose by more than 3 points. Now, this team that I'm picking has actually been in my pick 3 on several occasions during the season. They are also just out of my top 5 rankings from last week. They were a part of my question of the week. For those that haven't checked that out, please go check out last episode number 27, to respond to that question of the week. But my underdog pick of the week is the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Pittsburgh Steelers are currently favored to lose by 5.5 points. Now, this is a huge game. Both of these teams are near the top of the rankings. Both of these teams are scratching and clawing to try to get into the number 1 seed in their conference. The reason why I'm taking Pittsburgh to get this upset is, for one, they're in the same state, so like them being on the road isn't really going to have a huge effect on them. Pittsburgh Steelers fans travel all over the place. Most Pittsburgh's games have at least 40% of the fan base in the audience, no matter who they play. And with this also being in state, it's even easier for them to get to. So I think the crowd will actually be split pretty evenly. On top of that, I feel like Pittsburgh is really starting to get their momentum offensively, and Philadelphia is just coming off a media week that's not good for them. There's been, media assumption that Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown have been having a rift. There was Brandon Graham, who went on his podcast and commented about it, kind of added more fuel to the fire. They've since all kind of walked it back and said there's no big issue, but anytime something like this comes up, usually, like they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I do think there's something going on internally. The Eagles' passing game was not very effective in their last game. They only passed for like 100 yards. Now they won, so at the end of the day, it's like, by any means necessary. But I think they're going to have to be clicking on all cylinders to beat Pittsburgh this week. I think Pittsburgh's defense is really going to get after them. Now, it's a great matchup between a top defensive line versus a top offensive line. So we'll see chess matches in terms of blocking schemes to try to get to TJ Watt. And I do think that mobile quarterbacks have a better success rate against Pittsburgh's D-line just because of the way that they attack offenses. But at the end of the day, I just feel like Pittsburgh is going to show itself. They're going to be a little too strong, and it's the right timing considering all the turmoil that's going on in Philadelphia. And I'm picking Pittsburgh to pull off the upset as part of my underdog pick of the week. So that wraps it up for this week's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.